Commonwealth.com today and propel your business forward. Commonwealth Financial Network, member FINRA/SIPC, a registered investment advisor.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Asia. We're at 45 past the hour right now. Some weakness in the U.S. equity market today, particularly for infotech and consumer discretionary. Higher oil prices. We'll go through the price action for you coming up.
Now, Bloomberg traffic and weather in New Jersey, 17 southbound Franklin Avenue in Hasbrook Heights. An accident. One lane is blocked, and it's a pretty heavy ride coming down from Williams Street. Outbound Holland Tunnel, 30 minutes. 10 in from the Turnpike at 1 and 9. 15 out, 5 minutes in at the Lincoln Tunnel. Inbound upper level of the George Washington Bridge, 10 minutes, 5 minutes downstairs. Traveling in Manhattan, if you are trying to get up to the George Washington Bridge, the west side now slow. Looks like mid-70s up to about the mid-130s. Things easing out somewhat over on the FDR Drive, but the Harlem River Drive is still about 15 minutes headed on up. Up into Westchester we go. Looks like the ride there as you come up the Hutch. It's not terrible this evening, but you have some slow traffic from Weaver Street into just about the Marin Academy. Sports 6 host Charlotte. Rangers visit Detroit. Exhibition baseball, Yankees play Toronto, Mets play Houston. Bloomberg 11:30 3-day weather. Tonight, cloudy, low 40s. Thursday, afternoon showers and breezy. Looks for a high almost 70. Friday, partly sunny, breezy, high 60. And Saturday, sunshine, high near 55. Right now, we do have partly cloudy skies, 42 degrees. HGTV's Build It Forward in collab with Lowe's and 100 Hometowns will select 5 local heroes for a surprise home renovation of their dreams. Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern on HGTV and Discovery Plus with the best ride in and out of the city. I'm Nick Pileggi, Bloomberg 11:30.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
We'll get trading underway at the top of the hour in the Australian equity market. Futures now for the ASX 200 mildly positive. I'm going to call it a tenth of 1%. Stateside markets generally reacted to the notion, or I should say they retreated from the idea of an imminent de-escalation in the war in Ukraine. We had a recovery in the price of crude oil after a 2-day slide. WTI jumping about 3.4% here in New York. Right now we're trading 107.38 in the electronic session. Weekly data from the Energy Information Agency indicating that crude storage fell by a larger than expected 3.4 million barrels. So with that recovery in the oil price, energy shares, the best performing group within the S&P, but there was a great deal of weakness among consumer discretionary and information tech, and as a result, we had the S&P dropping about 0.6%. NASDAQ comp today weaker by 1.2%. The Dow was down about 0.2%. Over in the Treasury market, the entire yield curve moved lower after that brief inversion that we had yesterday. We talked about the segment, that 2 to 10 year segment that briefly inverted. A lot of conversation about how to read that inversion today. We'll talk more about that as we continue here on the program. Also want to point out that many of the U.S. rare earth metal miners rallied. That was after a report on President Biden possibly invoking the Defense Production Act as a way of encouraging domestic production of minerals used for those EV batteries. As we get set for trading in Asia, consider the fact that confidence among South Korean manufacturers dropped for the month of April, a reading now of 85. That's down from 93 in the month of March. And we're going to be looking critically at the PMI data for China later on this program. Some dollar weakness and a much stronger yen here at 121.90. That's weighing on futures for the Nikkei. Chicago contract implying a move of 200 points to the downside when Tokyo comes online in about an hour and 11 minutes from now. More on markets in 15 minutes. Let's get caught up on global news headlines. Denise Pellegrini is in the Bloomberg Newsroom. Denise?
Hey there, Doug. Thank you. Well, a new U.S. intelligence assessment shows that Russian President Vladimir Putin is being misinformed by his top advisors and that he doesn't trust them. Some Russian troops, meantime, relocating in Ukraine. About 20% of the forces near Kyiv are heading out, according to Pentagon spokesperson John Kirby. Well, where are they heading? Some of them, he says, are going north toward Belarus. Desperation being reported in Shanghai. Among those with chronic medical conditions, lockdowns are making getting regular medical care virtually impossible there. And local infections of COVID jumped 30% in the past 24-hour period. President Biden asking Congress to allocate more funding immediately, or else supplies, he warns, treatments, tests, and vaccines for COVID could run out in a matter of months. And an investigation is underway after Apple and Facebook's parent Meta apparently gave customer data to hackers, sources say, who were pretending to be law enforcement officials. And sources tell us the hackers made emergency requests for the data, so they bypassed the required search warrants and subpoenas. Customer addresses, IP addresses, phone numbers, all among the things that were inadvertently shared. Global News 24 hours a day, on air on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. In the newsroom, I'm Denise Pellegrini. This is Bloomberg Prime.
Denise, thank you. Welcome now to the Daybreak Asia Media and Tea Leaves review from the Financial Times and other papers, but I'm using the FT version. China has reaffirmed its partnership with Russia and said it wants to push bilateral relations to a higher level. Interesting, the timing. Wang Yi, China's foreign minister, told Sergei Lavrov, his Russian counterpart, that the two sides will to develop ties is even firmer than before. Our confidence, he says, even stronger. That's as Moscow faced international sanctions and widespread criticism over the war in Ukraine. And by the way, we told you a few moments ago that Lavrov will be heading to India later today, and India is another key partner of Russia that has refused to criticize the attack on Ukraine. From the South China Morning Post, the U.S. is said to be eyeing a chip alliance with Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan to squeeze China. The proposal was rejected by Seoul over fears that Beijing would retaliate against Samsung and SK Hynix. Those two have already invested billions of dollars in China's chip fabs. Since the outbreak of the pandemic, Washington has been looking for ways to reduce its supply chain reliance on China. And finally, from the ABC in Australia, the Australian government will announce that a new port will be built in Darwin after the current facilities were leased to a Chinese company. It's unclear whether the new port would be solely for industrial use or if it would be a facility that would be able to accommodate visiting naval ships from the U.S. and the UK. It's understood that the announcement will be made in the coming weeks by Prime Minister Scott Morrison's government during the Australian election campaign. That is a look at the media. Rashad, over to you.
Thanks very much indeed, Brian. Let's get to our next guest. We're joined now by Michael Casper. Michael is equity strategist at Bloomberg Intelligence, getting us up to speed with some of the top news on the markets. Thanks for joining us, Michael. You're suggesting at the moment that the S&P 500 may have made its bottom in the current route. Brian was saying earlier that when we see a yield curve inversion, that's normally a good signal for stocks. Give us a sense of where you're coming from.
Yeah, so the S&P 500 hit a death cross, which is a technical measure for, weakness in the S&P 500, where the 200-day moving average drops below the shorter-term moving average. And typically when that happens, stocks tend to bottom pretty close to that. And actually over the last 8 instances where that happened, the S&P 500 was up 6 of those times. On yield curve inversion, also, the last 30 times the 2-10s yield curve has inverted, stocks have been up 21 of those 30 times, down obviously the other 9 times. So not necessarily something to worry about. It definitely could signal a recession in 12 to 15 months, but in general, stocks are up over that period.
It's a little confusing because, we worry about a recession as something that often follows an inversion of the yield curve, and then we also hear that normally during a recession, stocks can fall 30 to 40% pretty easily, so it's tough to make sense of it. But I guess because there's a gap between the two, right? I mean, sometimes it's 12 to 18 months after a yield curve inversion that you get a recession, and if the recession is shallow, doesn't last too long, isn't that deep, then, you can sort of make out well. Perhaps you can kind of flesh that out a little bit more for us than you already did.
Yeah, so you're exactly right. 12 to 18 months out from 2-10 inversion has predicted recession, about 70% of the time, with a few false positives thrown in there, like the LTCM crisis back in 1998. In fact, the Fed actually uses the 10-year minus 3-month curve to assess recession risk, which is, quite strong right now, hovering around 180 basis points the last time I checked. And that one has actually been a little bit more reliable in predicting recession, in that it hasn't had as many false positives. It still did have that 1998 one, but some of the other examples were excluded. And even to the point where if we were to have this recession in 12 to 18 months, like many are predicting now that the yield curve did hit that brief inversion, it would merely be a signal of kind of a late cycle in the market, which tends to be an up period for the S&P 500.
Mike, a lot of people have talked about how this has been a shift from the bond market into equities, and of course that's no doubt been the case, but we're still playing catch-up here with regards to flows. This is something you've written about. Tell us about this.
Yeah, so bond equity flows, they had huge outflows throughout 2020. 2021 only reversed about 50% of the outflows that we had out of equities, and that's ETFs and mutual funds. Now, if you were to just segment out the ETF side of things, things look significantly better for stocks, where the outflows or the inflows into ETFs have outpaced those into bond ETFs. But looking at active and ETF together, bond inflows have been significantly greater, and now we're obviously with yields rising up a little bit, we're seeing a little bit of a reversal in that, obviously outflows from bonds cause yields to rise, and there's been a little bit of a resurgence over the last week or so with the equity market, with inflows coming back in a little bit.
Well, one of the other big stories today that we're featuring is Gary Gensler casting doubt on some sort of deal that would be near on avoiding the delisting of Chinese companies. He basically says that they still need to have total compliance. I suspect that a lot of that news is already factored into markets, because we had the NASDAQ Golden Dragon China Index down today, but it was only down 1.2%. And in comparison with some of the moves we've seen of late, that's not that much.
Yeah, you've certainly seen wild swings in some of these China stocks that are listed over here, like Alibaba. Just a week or so ago, you had a 20% up move as China's regulatory pressure kind of ended. So I think that move has been largely priced in over the last few weeks, at least the easing of the regulatory situation there.
But I was just going to ask very, very quickly about how the retail investor's doing.
Yeah, so retail has came back a little bit in force. One of my primary areas of coverage is the Russell 2000, and we've seen quite a bit of a surge back into some of those meme stocks, so the AMCs of the world, the GameStops of the world. So retail is certainly buying the dip, and has been over the last week, along with certainly institutional. So looks pretty healthy from that standpoint.
Interesting, Michael. Very nice to have you on the program. I think it's the first time. Anyway, we'll definitely have you back. Michael Casper, equity strategist at Bloomberg Intelligence. Top stories coming up next, and there's a clutch of them. This is Bloomberg. Now, Bloomberg traffic and weather on the Belt Parkway westbound by Coney Island Avenue. There was an accident. One lane is blocked. 45 minutes over from Rockaway Parkway. Now the ride of the Jackie Robinson still troubled eastbound at Forest Park Drive with an accident knocking out the left lane. 15 minutes from Bushwick Avenue. Traveling in Manhattan, if you are trying to get up to the George Washington Bridge, the west side at this point is cleared out pretty nicely. A little slow in spots, 120s into the 140s, but no major issue. Still about an extra 5 or 10 minutes approaching via the Harlem River Drive. Holland Tunnel 20 out 5 in 5 both ways. Over at the Lincoln Tunnel, no major issues now getting over the George Washington Bridge. They continue to work an exit into the westbound Southern State at Eagle Avenue. One lane block, 10 minutes from Peninsula Boulevard. Sports, Knicks host Charlotte. Rangers visit Detroit. Exhibition baseball tonight. Yankees play Toronto, and the Mets take on Houston. The Bloomberg 11:30 3-day weather forecast. For tonight, skies should be cloudy, lows 40 to 45. Thursday, afternoon showers, breezy, highs of 65 to 70. Friday, partly sunny, breezy, high 55 to 60. And Saturday, sunshine with a high 50 to 55. Right now in Central Park, skies are partly cloudy. Current temperatures at 42 degrees. With the best ride in and out of the city, I'm Dave Kalagi, and this is Bloomberg 11:30, bringing you global news 24 hours a day.
From the financial capital of the world, this is WBBR New York, Bloomberg 1130.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Asia for this Thursday, March 31st in Hong Kong, Wednesday, March 30th in New York. Coming up this hour, Asian equities are set for a cautious start as talks stall between Russia and Ukraine. President Biden is said to be planning to use Cold War powers to boost battery metal production. And India is said to be considering a proposal from Russia for bilateral payments.
U.S. intelligence says Putin isn't getting along with his military. Lockdown Shanghai residents scramble for medical care. An Apple and Meta get tricked by hackers claiming to be law enforcement. I'm Denise Pellegrini with Global News.
Is Manchester United looking to swap a player in cash to Tottenham for Harry Kane? I'm Dan Schwartzman, and I'll have that story and more coming up in Bloomberg Sports.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak Asia. On Bloomberg 1130 New York, Bloomberg 99.1 Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 106.1 Boston, Bloomberg 960 San Francisco, Sirius XM 119, and around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
Final day of the first quarter in Asia. We'll get the equity market trading in Tokyo in about an hour from now. If you're joining from the region, good morning. I'm Doug Krisner at the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York.
And I'm Paul Allen in